That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Good Grief, the directorial debut of Dan Levy, which Netflix actually granted a limited theatrical window to on December 29th, 2023, before it will be available to stream on their service January 5th, 2024.
I'm giving a disclaimer that if you're going to be upset we don't like this movie, you can turn this video off now.
Yes, be prepared for some hateration.
I'm not a hater, but I hated this movie.
I strongly dislike this film, yes.
The premise: when his husband unexpectedly dies, Marc's world shatters, sending him and his two best friends on a soul-searching trip to Paris that reveals some hard truths they each needed to face. What's your pull quote?
Dan Levy wraps himself in an obnoxious cocoon of self-absorbed, overwrought contrivances meant to resemble human experiences in a grating, inauthentic melodrama.
Mine. Good Grief starts out like a gay Nancy Meyers flick, but quickly turns into something void of emotion, humor, and romance.
Yeah, the Nancy Meyers note I liked, but then it quickly burrows beneath Ms. Meyers.
Okay, I want to start with two positives. I really like the movie title, because it could have...
It's like saying you like the credits, but okay.
And I think they pay a lot of money for the music in this movie, so... shout that out, because I did like all of those songs.
They did. I like Annie, and a great Robin track, and Neil Young. And, it's nice to see a resurgence of love for William Bell, because there's an opening choral rendition of Every Day Will Be a Holiday, or Be Like a Holiday, but Pablo Berger's Robot Dreams uses his song Happy as well.
People will be happy to know that I liked Red, White, and Royal Blue more than this film.
Sure.
Because that had something to it at least. Actually, I didn't hate Red, White, and Royal Blue.
I didn't like it.
But people interpreted it that I did. But this movie, the story. So Dan Levy plays Marcus, and he has this perfect, rich gay life with his husband, Luke Evans.
Oliver.
And Luke Evans is like a gay male J.K. Rowling. He's written a series of books about this character named Victoria
Valentine. They say Victoria Valentine too many times in the first 15 minutes, yes.
But, so they have this perfect life, and it's Christmas time, and Luke Evans has to leave, like, their holiday party to hop on a flight somewhere.
He's doing a book signing the next morning at the Louvre.
We'll talk about the details, but he ends up getting into a fatal car accident. So now Dan Levy is a widower.
With an eyesight of the apartment.
And his two best friends, Thomas and Sophie, played by...
Sophie is Ruth Negga, and Thomas is Himesh Patel.
Of course, they come to his side, as Sophie says, build a nest on top of him for a year, trying to get him to get through his grief. And we find out that the Christmas card Dan's husband was going to give him the year prior, Dan hasn't opened yet. But his therapist has told him that he needs to open it like a year later on Christmas. And this fool opens it, reads the card, and the card basically says that he has met someone else and he wants to explore a relationship with this person. So hope we can, get through this hurdle in our relationship. So of course that sends...
it should have been attached to a wrapped copy of The Ethical Slut. And that would have really driven that home.
We can't even say it sends him into a tailspin, because Dan Levy's affect, that character is flat throughout the entire thing. So who knows if he's happy, sad, upset, whatever. But what really cracks the egg is the best part of this movie was seeing Celia Imrie, who I know as Bing from Absolutely Fabulous.
And she's in many films, but yeah.
Yes. She plays Dan and Lucas's accountant. And she says, well, he had a very lucrative deal with the publisher for his next series of books. They gave him this enormous advance. Now that he's dead, they want the money back. So we need to rearrange some shit. So I've been going through your finances. And girl, I think you need to give up that pied-à-terre in Paris you have. Because Luke and... Is it Luke or Lucas?
Luke Evans.
Oh, I said Lucas. Luke and Dan live in the UK. So when the accountant says, get rid of your place in Paris, Dan's like, what place? Oh, well, he got it like not like right around the time he died, and
The spending would suggest that 2 people were there.
right, and what he spends on food and stuff, I would think that the 2 of you were there. So that's when we find out that he had got a place with his side piece. So what does Dan decide to do? Tell his 2 best friends that he wants to go on like a trip to cleanse his soul to Paris, and he'll foot the bill for everyone.
Because they have a place in Paris. But he doesn't tell his friends
Why they have a place, and the friends don't know that Luke was going to explore a new relationship. So they get there and that shit unravels quickly. The friends get upset, but ultimately, as the premise says, they kind of learn truths about themselves. We need to get into it because I don't know what they learned, but ultimately we find out that Thomas used to be in a relationship with Dan. It didn't work out, but Thomas still clings to Dan.
Yeah, but really, the knowledge of their previous relationship adds nothing to the dramatic context, but okay.
And Sophie, who's the most annoying character, not just in this movie, but in any movie I've seen in a very long time.
I feel bad that I think this is the first time you're seeing Ruth Negga, and this is not the film to be introduced to.
Because I know she's good in passing.
Oh, she's excellent.
Which I haven't seen.
Excellent in passing.
And I need to watch now to cleanse my palate.
And she was Oscar nominated in Loving, which I don't love that film, but...
Her character is so damn annoying. She is what people, I guess, would refer to as like a... I don't know. But I probably have to bleep that out. But she's so annoying and self-centered. And so I guess her character learns something in the end. I don't know what it is, because the entire time she's talking about this man, Terrence.
Who we meet briefly, but she gets cold feet when he proposes and breaks it off with her. So she learns that she's irresponsible.
But then she ends up being with him in the end. And Thomas ends up just out of the blue with this new boyfriend. And Dan decides that he wants to be alone after he sells the house to save money.
He wants to start painting again. And
he says, I need to be alone in a room overlooking the sea so I can be like a sad lesbian in a period drama. I thought that line describes this movie perfectly. This feels like someone got the opportunity to write a story and they had this fantasy in their head of what it would be like. But this script, I know people like this exist.
Is that a jab at Portrait of a Lady on Fire?
I know people like this exist, but I don't know any of them, and I don't think they'd want to know me. But this just felt so out of touch.
My first note was, am I an alien? Because I can't stand these people. This feels written by someone that hasn't had a long-term, complicated gay relationship, or somebody that doesn't know what it's like to... The friendship feels like how you act with your friends right out of undergrad, not people that are pushing 40.
Okay, well, let's start there. So the beginning of the movie is meant to seem like it's like a Lifetime Hallmark perfect, story with these 2 perfect people. So we would assume that they have this like monogamous, committed, long-term marriage. So of course, even though I didn't get the sense that, because the opening scene is that song you already referenced where they have like a sing-along that Luke Evans' character was meticulous about. And I was like, is this supposed to make me feel warm towards these people?
I mean,
because I don't.
I'd be like, I will excuse myself at this part of the party. And
then he dies.
Well, before he dies, as he's leaving and says goodbye to Dan Levy, he's like, you should shag the bartender who's making eyes at you. And I'm like, oh, stop the track. What's going on here?
But he dies, and it's in this like... it's vehicular manslaughter. It's like this major accident. We don't hear the car crash, but we hear the siren. So, and the crash is literally in front of the house. Like, we see Dan Levy's character power walk to the crash. So that entire opening, it's like, I don't feel anything for these characters, but I guess they were supposed to be in love and happy. Then, when we find out that Luke had a side piece, then it's like, oh, am I supposed to feel like Dan was betrayed? But then we find out after that they had an open relationship. So then it's like, now wait a minute. So you knew that your husband was having sex with other people. You explained that you guys had rules, which you don't explain to the audience, except that it was mainly like when he's out of town, he can do one and done things. So this doesn't feel as like the relationship and this thing happening doesn't feel as devastational as Reby Jackson would say.
Yeah, no, Reby, it doesn't.
As you would think, because your husband was already having sex with other people.
Because we're missing and this is largely due to the screenwriter, who's also the director, is missing the point of this whole thing.
Right. What is the point?
The point is to be like, I nursed my grief for a year stupidly because I put our love up on a pedestal, which nothing wrong with that, but not being realistic. I think that's the whole problem, is none of these people are realistic about what they're doing and why. And that's what's frustrating, because they don't have that epiphany, and he's not a good writer enough to let us know that that's intentional.
I didn't laugh, smile, or cry once. The only moment where I felt a little something is at Luke's funeral, when his father gets up and basically says, like, I'm so proud of my son. I love him. I feel so guilty that I never got to tell him I'm sorry, because when he was younger, he wanted to write these little, gay ass stories. And I told him that's not what men do. But he chose to be strong and pursue what he wanted, and look what he made of himself. That made me feel a little something. The problem is that whatever, eulogy, whatever you call it, was preceded by Kaitlyn Dever, because we're told that Luke Evans has all these young teenage girl fans, because I guess the kind of books he writes and also how he looks. So you have Kaitlyn Dever up there basically saying, like, she's so sad that he can't write
more
the next book.
So she's out of a job.
So was that supposed to be funny?
As Vicky Vale.
Was that supposed to be humor?
I guess so. It's not funny.
Then when I knew we were even more trouble is after everything settled down from the death, we see Dan and Thomas at his very fancy apartment in the UK, and they're watching The Real Housewives of New York, which just felt so basic. So
these are basic gays in the lap of luxury, and I just wanted somebody to slap it away from them, because that's what's tragic, is these stories about married couples. When one leaves, the other one's suddenly destitute. He gets to go paint at the seaside and resume his career.
Well, let's just sprinkle this review with things that could have been better. Sure. This movie could have been better if Dan's character was left without money, because maybe Luke had spent it all on this side piece, and so now he has to, like, really rebuild a life. But this character doesn't have to rebuild anything. He's rich. He has to, like, get rid of one property so
that he wasn't even
so he can continue not to work and go paint by the seaside.
That's not a pied-à-terre.
The apartment that Luke had in Paris is like a penthouse.
Yes, not a walk-up.
It has a guest room.
Yeah.
Very expensive. Like, it had an interior designer.
When he says all three of the people are going to come with him and stay there, I'm like, there's not going to be enough room to get a tear.
Right. No, plenty. Okay.
And then Sophie starts smoking in it.
Well, oh God. Well, just adding to how annoying she is. Mm-hmm. But at the 6-month anniversary of his death, we see that Sophie's trying to get Dan on, like, Tinder or some kind of dating app. That just felt so awkward. Then we flash forward to the year point, so, like, next Christmas, and that's when she's explaining, like, you need to get over it. Like, we've been trying to help you get through your grief for a year. As the audience, we didn't see how, except you tried to get his ass on Tinder. And her character is so awkward. She talks about Marcus, and, like, at one point when she has Dan's phone, she's saying, like, that she sees nude pictures of Marcus.
Of Oliver.
Of Oliver.
She's like, you kept his nudes. That's so romantic.
I just think it's all so weird.
And they've mentioned she's 35 a couple times.
I don't know why.
I think it's funny because she's older than that. But
so when Dan gets to the apartment in Paris, the penthouse, and hasn't told his friends what's going on. And okay, first of all, if my good friend, who I've known for years and years and years, their partner dies, and they tell me, hey girl, let's go to Paris.
We have a place there.
We have a place out there. And it's like, bitch, how did I not know? And then I get to the apartment and I see it's like lap of luxury. And you're walking around like you've never been here.
Even though he's saying he has, but he's walking around
like he's new here.
His behavior, if you're really his friend, you would say, like,
you would have some explaining to do. Mm-hmm. These friends don't even. Sophie's so self-absorbed. She's worried about,
dancing like she's crazy.
We need to have fun tonight. And Thomas wants to plan what they're doing. Like, okay. This doesn't make any sense.
And then they have this dinner date with some man she's ostensibly met somehow, somewhere, and he brings two friends, including a French woman and this other little gay boy.
Okay, I want to talk about that, but before they even get there, Dan is in the closet, and he finds a bag, like a gift bag.
To Luca.
So, of course, we assume, his side piece was named Luca. And then there is a really obnoxious scene where his character goes to the shop So it's like this fancy, maybe accessory shop. We don't know what was in the bag. And he tells the clerk, I want to return this. And they see the name on the card and they go, oh.
Oh, we loved Oliver. He brought us coffee.
They knew who this person was. And then Dan's character starts talking about, well, that was my husband, and he's dead, and this was for...
He goes, did he ever come in here with another man?
And then the clerk says, yeah, a guy who looked younger than you. What? This writing is crunchy.
This is the second scene because he puts Celia Imrie through the same thing when he finds out about the apartment in Paris of like screaming at her, and it's not her business.
I'm your your financial manager.
It's not. Why are you putting these innocent people through your bullshit? They don't care.
Oh, it was so...
It's so self-centered and...
So getting to the three people you mentioned, this guy, I didn't understand how Sophie met this guy because this guy doesn't know Dan's character or Thomas. So that means that he can't really know Sophie that well because her entire life is about these two fools. Mm-hmm. So it's like, and then he brought on his two co-workers, one of whom has only known him for a day. Mm-hmm. And this young, cute kid is all over Thomas. Uh-huh. Also, I thought Thomas looked like the actor Stephen Miller, who people might know from 21 Jump Street.
Is it Stephen Miller or Stephen Williams?
Oh, Stephen Williams. I'm sorry. Anyway, I thought those three characters would have made for a better trio than the trio we received. Mm-hmm. They're just so uninteresting and annoying.
Uh-huh. Self-involved, navel-gazing. Why do we care about these people? They have nothing to say about anything.
Then they decide to take these three strangers to karaoke. And that karaoke scene was so... And I can just picture Dan Levy being so insufferable during the filming of that scene because his character has to sing. And it was just like, there was no feeling to it. I didn't mention, earlier on in their trip to Paris, which I guess it's like day 2 now, Dan had bumped into this guy. Like this gay guy.
They weren't in Paris.
Or they were in London?
They met in London.
Oh, you're right. So this guy happened to be in Paris.
And he said he lives in Paris.
Oh, that's right. Mm-hmm. Oh, you're right. Anyway, this guy he bumped into in the UK.
Theo, played by Arnaud Valois.
Theo, miraculously, happens to be in the same karaoke house in Paris as Dan.
I think he invited him there.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, I think so.
Anyway, they meet. Dan goes to kiss him. And now they have a date, which was so awkward. They go eat French onion soup. And then they go to a museum that is closed. And then Theo knocks on the door and says something to security. Mm-hmm. It doesn't seem like they know each other.
He's like, this is my... No, I think they do. He's like, this is my friend Marc. Blah, and he just lets him into...
They let him into this like closed museum.
To watch some Claude Monet.
And that's where Dan's going on about, I could never do this. And Theo's saying, oh, yes, you can. How you know? You don't even know me. You've known me for 6 hours.
What also doesn't make sense is drinking a lot. There's shots involved, lots of wine, lots of food, and then French onion soup. And
So getting to another thing that I would have made for a better story is it's at the hour mark of this movie where Dan tells Theo that he feels like he abandoned his mom when he got into a relationship with Luke.
Mm-hmm. And she died.
And then she died, and so he feels guilty that he never got to be there with his mom and then wasted on this man who ended up doing some shit that I feel like you could have worked through. Mm-hmm. But anyway, then I thought that could have been a great story.
Yeah. That could have been the first 15 minutes of the film. I think he should have had that conversation when he first met Theo so that when they do meet again, there's something more to go off of. Like, we pondered life for a little bit separately. Because, I don't know, Theo asked if this is a date. And it's like, what a terrible date.
You said something funny. This film needs a chiropractor because it's all out of whack.
It is all out of whack.
I did feel like, God, we got to some stuff that was more usable so late in the game. Okay. So that night when they're doing karaoke and Dan leaves, he tells his friends, I'll be right back, but he doesn't. He spends all night with Theo. So the next morning when he gets back to the pied à terre, they are mad. Like, you left us. Thomas is mad that he had to pay the bill.
Which, sure, but I'd say like Venmo me, yeah.
And then he's mad that Sophie left with that guy she had just met and ended up being picked up by the police because she was asleep on a bench.
And lost her phone.
And I just thought, in the history of gay friends, has anyone ever gotten mad that you left suddenly to go get some dick? That just doesn't even seem right. These three people seem so raggedy anyway. I can't imagine that. Except that Thomas is obsessed with Dan. But then that should have been the story.
He is, but also not. And his character is woefully underdeveloped because that scene on the Ferris wheel where he's finally like, it's never about me. Okay, that's not really that clear to me.
Okay, getting to what I think would have made for the best story for this, what we received, is when they are all sitting in the pied-à-terre, upset that, Dan left them. Someone walks into the apartment. They have a key, and it's Luca.
Of course.
Mm-hmm. And they look at him. Well, first of all, I thought the director thought it was cute because when Luca walks in, we hear a siren go by. Like, okay.
From traffic outside, yeah.
But I thought, wouldn't it have made more sense to make this story about this widower who finds out that his late husband was seeing someone else, and then the widower goes to confront the someone else, and they end up building a relationship that helps him get through his grief.
Yeah, like maybe I can understand something more about my dead partner that I didn't know, or
right.
maybe I didn't know that he had this need that he was afraid to communicate with me.
Something with depth.
Something with depth that's about the complications of relationships, gay and not.
What do we get from Luca? Nothing. All we learn is that he's
a dancer in Berlin.
He's a dancer, and that he won a scholarship through Olivier's nonprofit, and that they would just, I guess, have sex whenever they were both in Paris. Because Luca doesn't even live in Paris.
No.
He lives in Berlin. Like, they couldn't even give the side piece purpose.
No, and then there's this awkward dinner.
Because Luca has nowhere to go because he was planning on sleeping in this penthouse. So they let him stay, which I thought that could have been, they could have expounded on that. Nothing. That kid sits at the dinner table and doesn't say a word.
Sophie makes dinner that she burns.
She burns some potatoes au gratin. Then the three of them go out. And I wrote down, where's Luca? They just left his ass. And then the next day we see that he's packing up. And that's when he and Dan finally have a talk. And basically he just says that, your husband really loved you. And still, Dan's character cannot just not be, he's just, his affect, he's just so
Well, it's just like, okay,
smarmy.
Dan Levy wants to direct a movie and write a movie. I think he should have cast someone else in this role, because what we get is David from Schitts Creek without the
any humor,
smug comedy, but he still feels
super smug. Poor Celia Imrie.
Yeah.
She has a monologue at the end that I feel like that poor lady's acting was wasted on this movie.
It was.
Because her entire storyline with Dan's character is that she doesn't get personal with her clients because it's just about business. But then she can see that he's hurting and that he's not really reacting to the fact that he's selling the home he had with his late husband. So then she reveals, oh, well, my wife died 12 years ago. And you can see on Dan's face that he maybe didn't even know she was a Lasabian. And I just thought that was so wasted.
Well, also,
because she's crying and he's just looking at her like, like he's waiting, like she just took his order at the drive-through window. Like,
yes, I think his affect's a bit too flat, and a lot of scenes where it's necessary that it not be. But also, I think that he could have. She says that when her wife died, she went back to school in finance and built her business up. And it's like, well, wait, how old were you when you went back to school?
Wow.
I don't like. There's just things that once you cast her, why don't you say my wife died 22 years ago? Like instead, because
well, speaking of
those kind of details take you out of it, and you're like, wait, what?
Speaking of details, I feel like whoever wrote this,
Dan Levy,
their knowledge of like physiology and neurology is weak, because we get two moments where he's explaining Dan's character about like, I heard that the brain, or I read that the brain's like a muscle, and that felt so rudimentary. Like, we know how the brain works, and there are neural pathways and synapses, and like, let's get with it. Then the poor accountant's talking about something related to the body reacting.
Physiology.
And it's just like, this feels so basic.
It feels like higher. It feels like the kind of conversation you'd hear on a Real Housewives episode, and they think they're really doing something.
I thought it was ironic that Dan's character, who's supposed to be a painter, apparently he paints. We see him try to paint something, and what he does is he takes like a projection of an image, and projects it over a canvas and traces it.
That's one way to do it.
So I was like, that's how you paint, by tracing? And then I thought, is that how you wrote this movie? Like, you just got me something.
But then his subjects are only the people we see in the film.
Okay, what really, like, the cherry on top of this Sunday is we go to see that Dan has his artwork being presented at the Patricia Devine Gallery. And you were like laughing because you're like, yeah, come see the paintings of my dead husband. And that's what it is. He has painted these tracings of his dead husband and his friends. Who would buy these?
I wanted to see something grotesque, like there's a series of paintings where his anger is fleshed out and you see Luke Evans like mauled or torn apart.
Who would buy paintings from a person who's not famous of people who he knows personally? And then the person who wrote this script decided to include in there, he tells one of the subjects, Sophie, you can't have this painting. Mm-hmm. Who else would buy it? Who else would want these paintings? And then the real gag is the end of the film is a montage of all the paintings. Whoever painted them, I do think they did a good job.
They did.
But I think it's ironic that we get a montage of the portraits as if we got to learn anything about these people.
Or really care about them. I don't know. I'd suggest if you haven't seen, spoiler alert for a recent film dealing with
I was
somebody
thinking
dying.
about that.
Or also, do you remember that Peruvian film from 2009, Undertow?
Yes.
By Javier Fuentes.
I would recommend Undertow. I would recommend Spoiler Alert.
Any number of films about somebody that's gay that's lost their lover in any kind of circumstance.
If I see any comments about people being mad about this, I'm blocking them because I already said that I didn't like this movie. What would you give Good Grief?
1.
I would give it 1 out of 5. Join us on Patreon. Listen to our podcast. Bye.